on this week's episode of In the Suite with Tina Powell.
A lot of people think of legacy as, again, a wealthy person problem. But when I think of legacy, I think about what are the values that you want to pass on to your heirs and your family and the people you've touched? What are the charities that you care about? What are the life lessons you want to pass along? And so we think of a legacy kind of holistically. It's certainly about asset distribution, but it's also about the purpose behind it and communicating that. Because one of the biggest challenges that families can face, regardless of wealth level, is lack of clarity on what the deceased wanted.
Hi, this is Tina Powell, host of In the Suite, where I sit down with top women leaders and some of the biggest names in the financial services and the wealth management industry. Together, we'll discover some of their best secrets and top strategies to grow a great business, build a strong brand, and lead teams in the 21st century. I hope you'll enjoy hearing their amazing personal stories of triumph, trepidation, and transformation in hopes of becoming better leaders ourselves. The time for you to lead is now, and you're in the suite. Today, I'm thrilled to welcome a powerhouse in fintech and leadership in the suite, Jean Farrell, President and CEO of Vanilla. If you think estate planning is confusing, costly, or only for the ultra wealthy, this episode is going to flip that belief on its head. Jean joins us to talk about how Vanilla is on a mission to reimagine and radically simplify estate planning, making it accessible, human, and empowering for advisors and families alike. This conversation is especially meaningful to me as someone navigating a personal health journey. I've come to understand just how vital it is to plan ahead, not just for ourselves, but the people we love. It's not just paperwork, it's peace of mind, and Vanilla is helping to make that possible. Founded in 2019 by renowned entrepreneur and financial advisor Steve Lockshin, Vanilla was born out of a deep understanding of the wealth management space and a bold vision to modernize how legacy planning gets done. Backed by leaders like Michael Jordan and Bill McNabb, Vanilla is transforming an industry that has long been overdue for innovation. In today's episode, Jean brings both personal passion and professional fire. We talk about everything from the heartbreaking family experience that fuels his drive at Vanilla to his journey through fintech and tech giants like Coca-Cola, Amazon, and Smartsheet. Yes, Jean is the brains behind the Coca-Cola Freestyle. You know, that magical machine that lets you mix over 100 drink combinations? Yeah, that was Jean. But this episode goes deeper. We dive into how Vanilla is transforming the advisor-client relationship through intelligent estate planning tools, using AI, intuitive design, and real human connection. You'll hear about the myth of estate planning is only for the rich, why 92% of clients want their advisor's help, but only 23% get it, and what you can do about it. Plus, we explore the power of legacy, leadership, and living with intention. So whether you're a fintech founder, a financial advisor, or someone like me navigating your own life journey, this episode is packed with wisdom, innovation, and inspiration. So get ready for an unforgettable conversation with one of the most purpose-driven leaders in fintech, right here in the suite. Jean Farrell, wow. Take a seat in the suite. How are you doing this May Day? It's so great to see you.
Hey, Tina, thank you for having me. Excited to be here.
Yeah, I'm really, really excited too. You know that I've been looking forward to this conversation. This is a favorite part of my role at Intentionally. I could just do this every single day. I just love it. And Jean, we're in for a wild ride, ladies and gentlemen. I'm just going to tell you right now, okay? Because Jean, here's the thing. It's so unique that I'm getting to talk to a president and CEO in fintech, but that also too has had a remarkable career at Coca-Cola, at Amazon, now leading Vanilla as president and CEO. You have reinvented yourself across industries. It's such a great, powerful learning lesson. And now today you are reimagining estate planning. You guys know I'm going through some medical stuff here. So something that I'm really near and dear to my heart, estate planning, beneficiary designations, all of those things that are involved. So let's start at the top. Let's start at the top. You are at a company called Vanilla. Yes,
Yeah.
Vanilla. Tell us, what is Vanilla and who is it built for?
Well, Tina, Vanilla is really built for financial advisors to help them help their clients build and manage their estate plans. And estate planning has really been an underserved segment of the market from a technology perspective. There are lots of estate planning attorneys out there. There are lots of folks that are happy to take your money to help you build a plan, but it can be quite confusing and really hard to get started and actually way more expensive than it should be. And so what we've learned when we started Vanilla, we did some research, and what we learned was that most advised clients, in fact, 92% of advised clients actually want their financial advisor to help them with the estate planning process. Yet today, only about 23% of clients are actually getting that service from their advisors. And so we really created Vanilla because we just thought it was too hard, and it was too hard for both the clients and for advisors to really make sure they had the right plans in place to protect their families. Our mission really is to empower everyone to create a meaningful legacy, and that's regardless of wealth level. And so one of the misnomers is many people think of estate planning as something only for the wealthy, when I've got to worry about estate taxes or really complicated estates. But the fact is, eventually we're all going to pass, and having a plan for your family that protects them and supports them when they're going through that life change is just critically important, and probably one of the greatest gifts you can give them.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen this play out in my own family. And after spending 8 years in the office and not moving from that office, Gene, for a traditional RIA, before all of these types of tools were invented, I remember what I'll call like the clunkiness of estate planning. Is there a way? It would be so great to get a list of advisors who are currently utilizing a tool like Vanilla for estate planning.
Yeah, that's actually something we get pretty frequently. Folks will come to our website and they'll do a form fill like for a demo, but they'll say, actually, I don't want to do a demo. I just want an advisor in my market that is using your product. So they can certainly reach out to us, contact us, and we can refer you we have literally hundreds of firms that are using Vanilla, and we're happy to refer you to someone in your market that can help.
I love that. And ladies and gentlemen here listening in the suite, like, hey, one of the things I've learned too, if you don't ask, you don't get.
Yeah, for sure.
So be curious. I want to kind of go back to a little bit of the origin story of Vanilla, because I have to ask you about the name, Gene. You know that we love this kind of stuff at Intentionally, right?
Yeah.
We've got Advisor Brand Builder, and we're very intentional about the names, the adjectives, the messaging, the strategic messaging, the words we use, and most importantly, the words that we don't use. So I have to ask you where Vanilla came from, not the traditional name that you would expect for like an estate plan.
No. Well, so full disclosure, Vanilla actually predates me. I joined the company in 2021, but it really originated with our founder and our founding team, and which was a small group of kind of pioneers in the space who really bought into Steve's vision for really empowering everyone to create that meaningful legacy. And we're working with Steve to kind of build the initial product. And Steve, who's a 35 plus year wealth advisor, probably one of the most respected and leading estate planning experts in the country. And, he has some of the most high profile clients you can imagine, from the Michael Jordans of the world to high profile folks in finance and entertainment. And so Steve is really sought after for his expertise. And one of Steve's philosophies is that too many times planners and estate attorneys actually create too much complexity in their clients' trust structures and their plans. And that's a problem, because complexity leads to, anytime you want to make a change, you likely have to engage more attorneys and spend more money. But it's also a problem because it can lead to unintentional inconsistencies that can cause disputes and other problems. So he has this philosophy of creating a very kind of straightforward approach around your trust structures, and then having a very specific letter of wishes, which is really the instructions to the trustees on how to actually distribute and manage the assets in your estate. And so Steve has this way of phrasing it. He says, we just need a plain vanilla trust. And then you want to have a plain vanilla structure to this strategy. And he uses that term, plain vanilla, all the time. And so this founding team is going over it, and Steve keeps using this phrase over and over again. And then my understanding of the story was Steve had to go to a client meeting while they were having this debate over what to name the company. And so Steve stepped out for a client meeting, and he came back and they said, we've got it. We've settled on the name. And he says, okay, well, what is it? And they said, vanilla. And he was like, I love it. That's amazing. And what's interesting is when I first joined the company, the board and Steve kind of asked me, what do you think about the name? Do you think we should change it? Should we make it like estate tech or some sort of kind of estate specific name? And I thought, you know what? There's actual meaning behind vanilla. It wasn't like we went out to some naming service and had them come up with a recommendation. And there was really intention in it, and it has a kind of it's part of the origin. And so I really like that. Plus, I think it's unique. And if you can build a brand around that unique name, I think it can be memorable and powerful. And I've worked for another company that happened to follow that strategy in Amazon, and it seems to have worked out okay for them. And so we're gonna try it.
Yeah, I can't wait to talk about that Amazon experience too, for sure. And I should mention, everybody, the URL for Vanilla is justvanilla.com. Everybody, justvanilla.com will get you to the website. And a huge shout out to Steve Lockshin, who is, if you are in wealth management, ladies and gentlemen, you have heard his name. You have seen him everywhere in every publication there is. Gene, we're seeing a lot more of you. I know that you just joined the company that you said in 2021. Steve started the company in 2019. And that explains you have some incredible backers at Vanilla. I know that we already mentioned Michael Jordan's name, Bill McNabb from Vanguard, and Jason Wenk, who's founder and CEO of Altruist. You guys, we know that he's been making a huge splash in the industry too. That is quite a lineup and says really something about Vanilla. What is it about Vanilla that's resonating with the Jason Wenks of the world?
Yeah. Well, I would say we've been blessed by Steve having the reputation that he has. And I think when Steve's been evangelizing the idea of vanilla for years. And so a lot of folks in the industry have really kind of bought into his vision and believe it's a problem we need to solve as an industry. And Steve obviously took the initiative to start the company. And along the way, though, I think some of the disciples he created, but not just the individuals you mentioned, and there are a bunch more, kind of pillars in the industry who were early investors and have continued to invest. But we also have large institutions like Vanguard, who participated in the Series A, Edward Jones, who participated in the Series B, folks like Nationwide Insurance and Allianz, who see the value of estate planning. And then, of course, I've got an amazing board with Bill McNabb as part of the board. Our investors from Insight and Venrock, so top name venture firms, and Bob Thornton, formerly of First Republic. So a lot of really, really strong backers and supporters of what we're trying to build. And I think it's really a testament to Steve's vision and the market need that we see out there.
And another thing that I want to say is that, and you had mentioned earlier, Gene, the fact that there's a big myth, and that is that you have to be wealthy to have an estate plan. And so we are in over 84 countries and almost 2,000 cities here in the suite. So if you're listening, and if the concept of estate planning is new to you, you can just think of it as the formal way to document your wishes. Would you add anything onto that?
Well, I would say I kind of think of estate planning as having three dimensions to it. There's what we think of as protection. There's legacy, and then tax efficiency. And probably the most important, the reason I put it first, is protection. And the way you protect your family if something happens to you, whether it's expected or unexpected, is really there's two ways. First is ensuring you have sufficient liquidity that if something happens to them, that it doesn't disrupt their lives or devastate their lives. And for most folks, that means having sufficient life insurance and really being thoughtful about, hey, if something happens to me, is my partner or my wife going to have to pay off a mortgage? Is there other debts that they need to retire? Or is there kids' college that they need to pay for? Anticipate what are the things, the life events that you're expecting to be able to support, and build that into your calculation. Many times people think about life insurance and kind of look at it and say, well, will they be able to afford my final expenses, and will they be able to cover maybe living expenses for some period of time? They don't always think holistically about it. And we actually have tools for clients and advisors to let them go through that whole calculation to figure out how much life insurance they actually need. So first is that liquidity piece. Second is around having the right estate planning documents. Documents are so important because
they make everything, right? I didn't mean to interrupt you, but I'm like, I can't resist. Like the documents.
Because what the documents enable you to do is they enable you to be very clear on your intentions for how you want your assets to be passed. And in many cases, they enable you to avoid the probate process, which can be quite lengthy, drawn out, and expensive, and can be quite trying on a family. When you're grieving a loved one, and then you have to go through this process where all of the assets are tied up for a period of time, where anybody can make claims on the estate. And so that can be kind of a trying thing for most families. And so, good documents help you avoid that, or at least minimize the impact of that process as much as possible. And then importantly, documents ensure you get to decide how you want your assets distributed instead of somebody that you may not even know. So in some states, for example, if someone dies without a proper will or any kind of documents, the state actually decides how their assets are distributed. And in many times, probably in most cases, it's not what the person would have wanted to have happen.
And it's very public too, right? Like
and it's also
the other
very
thing.
public.
Yeah, we've seen a lot of celebrity death. The gentleman from, and I'm sorry for getting his name, from One Direction, who died without an estate, right? Because he was really super young, but he had like I think Gene, he's got like a 34 million net worth that automatically went to like the girlfriend, and they have a child together and stuff. I was actually happy that it went to her.
Yeah, that's a good outcome, but it doesn't always work that way. Some state laws might send it to the parents or an estranged relative that you don't have a relationship with anymore. So the documents are critically important. But to finish out the top three, so that's number one. Number two is around legacy. And a lot of people think of legacy as, again, a wealthy person problem. But when I think of legacy, I think about what are the values that you want to pass on to your heirs and your family and the people you've touched? What are the charities that you care about? What are the life lessons you want to pass along? And so we think of a legacy kind of holistically. It's certainly about asset distribution, but it's also about the purpose behind it and communicating that. Because one of the biggest challenges that families can face, regardless of wealth level, is lack of clarity on what the deceased wanted. And when the family doesn't understand, it many times leads to disagreements or fights, regardless of the amount of money involved. And so it's just super important to be clear, whether if you're allocating money to go to charity, heirs might question, well, why? And why didn't that come to me? Or if you're saying, hey, I want this gift to go to education, again, people will have questions like, why is that the case? And why is that so important? So we help our advisors and our clients manage that through what we call a letter of wishes, which is a really straightforward non-legal document. It's actually just a letter that is designed as a companion to your trust that lets you communicate in plain language how you want your assets distributed. And the trustee's supposed to follow that. And if you create the right plain vanilla trust, there'll be the proper protections in there so that if the trustee doesn't, they can be replaced and you can ensure that your wishes and your values are passed along. And then third, and this becomes a bigger issue as certainly as you have more assets, but a lot of people forget there are a number of states in the US that have state level estate taxes and inheritance taxes. So, and many times those are much lower than the federal exemption level. So, for example, I'm a resident in the state of Washington, where today the estate tax exemption is $1 million per individual. So my wife and I would get to exempt the first $2 million of our assets from estate tax. But after that, the state would like 20%. And the federal exemption now is $27 million for a couple. A lot of people fall well below that. They don't really need to worry about it. But I can assure you, particularly with the price of homes in a state like Washington or in the Seattle area, almost every homeowner is probably going to run into a challenge with being subject to Washington state estate tax. So not having the proper planning can create a real surprise when you think you're going to go create impact for your heirs. And it turns out, the state takes a big chunk of it.
Yeah, I remember that tax efficiency piece that you're talking about with regards to estate planning. And the CEO and founder of our firm, Mark Germain, always said, it's not what you make, it's what you keep. And so tax efficiency was a really big thing. And I saw how firsthand how ILETs, QPERTs, all of these like different trust vehicles, very confusing. You definitely need to work with an estate. There are so many different types of trusts. I was like astounded, and like you're hitting upon the state in which you live also too. The rules are different in all of the states. So basically, ladies and gentlemen, what I am saying is this is a very confusing topic, but a topic that also too, you had mentioned the word parents, right? You had mentioned this is very much like a family. This is very much like an inner circle kind of opportunity that can really pull together a family unit in a really good way. And one of the things that I wanted to make sure that we had a conversation about, Jean, was the fact, like, look, Steve Lockshin definitely knew what he was doing when Jean Farrell came on board in 2021. I think something more deep that most of the people wouldn't know about you. There's another reason why you're here. And I think that is an incredible story to tell. I don't want to do it a disservice. I would love for you to share a little bit about what I'm talking about.
Sure. Absolutely, Tina. And I've made no secret about it. One of the things that motivated me to take this role at Vanilla was my own personal experience with estate planning. And when I was really in my early 40s, I lost both of my parents within a year of each other. And they both died well before their time for very different reasons. But going through that process of both losing a parent, but then as the oldest of four siblings, having to navigate a scenario where neither one of them had an estate plan. And while neither one of them had significant assets, they had enough, whether it be personal property that had sentimental meaning or some retirement accounts, some investment accounts, where not having a clear sense of what their intentions were and what they wanted to do created a massive rift in my family. And in fact, there was a period of time when I think one of my brothers and my sister didn't talk to each other for years because of a disagreement they had over how to deal with my parents' assets. And everybody has their own perspective on it, but without clear direction from the deceased, one person's opinion is, oh, it's a gift. The other person's opinion is, oh, it's a loan. One person's opinion is, oh, mom wanted me to have all of her jewelry. Somebody else says, no, actually, mom wanted it shared. Okay, how do you sort that out? And you don't really have a good way to do it unless the deceased actually was clear about it in their planning. And so that for me was a very challenging time. I saw how it tore our family apart at a time when we really should be coming together and supporting each other. And I just thought, man, I don't think any family should ever have to go through that. So that was a big life lesson for me. And then not long after that, I had an opportunity to update my estate plan. My wife and I worked with our advisor, who essentially said, here's the name of a great estate attorney, and passed us off to an attorney who I thought did a fine job for where we were. But it was a very confusing process. I spent a fair amount of money just being educated on the components of an estate plan and how to do it, which in hindsight, you shouldn't have to spend thousands of dollars just to learn the basics of how to do an estate plan. And then I had to spend the money to actually build the plan itself. And what I ended up with was, back in the old days, we would call it a phone book thick stack of documents with a cover page that had some hand-drawn charts on it and a bunch of scribbles that if it was a test, there's no way I could explain what my estate plan actually did. And so that experience of spending too much and ending up with something that I'm not even sure really met my needs really was an inspiration for me to say, this needs to be better for people.
Well, I'm going to be one of those people that are going to contact you after this podcast and say, okay, Jean, I'm in the state of Pennsylvania. And what advisor can I work with on my estate planning? My listeners know that I've been battling a significant health crisis. And so it is, which was, again, I couldn't wait to have you in here because I do think like the universe has a rhyme and a reason for these things happening and for the timing of conversations and people entering in my life. It might sound a little woo-woo to some people, and that's okay.
But
yeah, exactly. So I feel like our life experiences that bring us to this point, I'm really excited about actually creating my estate plan through Vanilla. And hopefully to the people listening, especially if you have something going on medically right now, the thing that you said, Jean, that really makes it all come together is the fact like in that moment of despair and loss and sadness and grief and struggle and challenge, that's the time that a family wants to actually be closer together, not further apart. Let's take a moment to talk about growth. If you're in financial services and wondering how to move the needle on metrics that truly matter, pipeline, revenue, and profitability, you need a marketing partner who gets it. And intentionally, we're not just any marketing agency. We are the go-to growth consultancy for fintechs, RIAs, custodians, broker-dealers, and asset managers. Our team of cross-functional growth specialists works seamlessly across your firm to accelerate results. Ready to get intentional? Visit intention.ly/contact-us to schedule your strategy call with me and start transforming your growth engine today. Now, let's get back to the conversation. You were behind something really, really exciting about Coca-Cola, and I never knew the name of the machine. You guys have seen this machine. It's called the Coca-Cola Freestyle, right, Jean?
Yes,
okay,
is.
The Freestyle. The ability to get maybe 50, 100, I don't know what the level is.
Over 100.
Over 100, anything you want coming from the same machine. So you were the leadership and part of the engineering behind that. Could you talk a little bit about that experience? I was so excited to talk to you about it.
Well, it was certainly a kind of a career shaping and transformational experience for me. So a little about my background. I grew up just south of Seattle, Washington, a little town called Renton, which is actually kind of known for having a big Boeing 737 airplane manufacturing facility there at the time, and also the town where they produce Kenworth semi-trucks. So more of maybe a blue-collar town in Washington. I was the first in my family to go to college, and I got a degree in business. And went to work right out of school for the Coca-Cola Company and had a great career there. And the first portion of it was all in sales and marketing and different general management roles. And I had an opportunity later in my time there to lead an internal innovation project. It was really a startup inside of Coca-Cola. And I'd actually been talking to management about what I wanted to do next. And I thought what I wanted to do at the time, Coke was buying a lot of smaller beverage companies. And when they would do that, they would install someone to be an executive to be the CEO of the company that they acquired. And I thought that's what I wanted to do. And then they came to me one day, I'll never forget, the president of the division at the time, Chris Lowe, called me and said, "Hey, I'd love for you to come to Atlanta." I was in Seattle at the time. I want to show you something. And so I flew to Atlanta and he took me down into this kind of secret room in the basement of the technical building. And he showed me this prototype that looked like a traditional fountain machine that was all wired up with all these. If you've ever seen a prototype, it was about as jerry-rigged as you can imagine. And they're showing me this idea that originally started out as how do they take water out of the supply chain to make it more efficient. But it turned into, we can create these beverages on demand at the restaurant or at the movie theater, and we're not sure the technology will work, but we're not sure what to do with it. And so we're trying to figure out, how do we turn this into something that kind of revolutionizes our business? a lot of people don't know is Coca-Cola has a long tradition of being available in a fountain. They still have an 80 plus share of anytime you get a Coke away from home. And so this was kind of a chance to reinvent the oldest part of the Coca-Cola company. And so I asked Chris at the time, I said, so is this a job? What are you offering me here? He said, well, it's a project. And he said it could be 3 months or 3 years. And if it doesn't work out, don't worry about it. There's lots of jobs in Atlanta. When I reflect on that conversation now, the one thing he didn't say was there's lots of jobs at Coca-Cola in Atlanta. He just said there's the jobs in Atlanta. But I would tell you, initially I thought it was crazy because at the time I was an area vice president. I ran about a quarter of the country for our food service business. I had a big team, a high profile position. And I moved to take this role. I had to move out of that position into this skunk works where I was leading a startup. And not only that, I couldn't tell anybody what I was doing. It was
that's right.
all under NDA.
Oh, wow.
So my title went from like area vice president to vice president of special projects, which the history at Coke was typically that was a title you got when you did something really bad and was usually the precursor to a different business card that said consultant. So anyway, when I contemplated this role, I couldn't sleep literally that night after I talked to Chris about it. And I woke up the next day just saying, I can't not do this. This just seems like such an incredible opportunity to go try and create something brand new. And so I moved my family from Seattle back to Atlanta. My kids were both young at the time and dove in. I couldn't even tell my wife what I was working on. And when I started, it was like me and 6 engineers. And we spent the next really 6 years inventing the technology, doing a bunch of consumer research and figuring out what it should be. We learned a lot about, what people did and didn't want. It was just an incredible experience to take it all the way from idea to commercialization. And then we roll it out into a couple of different countries.
For me, I mean, it was just the fact that this machine like even exists. I was like, wow, how'd they do that? That is really something special. So kudos to you. What an amazing achievement here. And one of the reasons that I wanted to bring you in the suite too, because if you're reimagining, my business partner, Kelly Waltrick, CEO, founder of Intentionally, she has the same type of superpower that you do, and that is building high performance teams. Like you don't get to reimagine the future. You don't get to behave boldly and unapologetically all by yourself. It takes a village. Do you want to talk a little bit about that? I mean, whether or not that was an experience at Coca-Cola, Amazon, Smartsheet, what can you tell us about building high performance teams from scratch?
Yeah, well, it's something I've had a chance to do through my whole career, whether it was my first management jobs at Coca-Cola or like when I took on Freestyle, it started with me and like 6 engineers. And then, by the time we got that to market, it was a couple hundred people spread across, different parts of the world between ourselves and our development partners. When I made the leap to Amazon, I started as employee 1 building a new service. And
wow.
5 years later, I had a team of about 500 people. So I've had a lot of experience with building out teams. And I would say, a lot of my beliefs around leadership and management were really shaped by some early career experiences I had and actually some books I read. The original author was Marcus Buckingham when he was back at the Gallup organization. And there was a book called First Break All the Rules. And that was followed up by a book called Now Discover Your Strengths. And the gist of it, and I still recommend people I work with, they read these books, but the gist of the book, First Break All the Rules, was a study. Marcus at the time was working for Gallup. They were trying to understand, Gallup's primarily a research organization. They were trying to understand what differentiates performance across different locations of the same brand, if you will, where everything appears to be the same, yet some outlets perform really, really well and others don't. And they would use an example of like a Target store. And you could have a Target store in 2 different cities with almost identical demographics, identical socioeconomic conditions, yet one store might be one of the top stores in the system and the other one is just average or below average. And they started to go in and kind of understand what's causing this variation in performance. And what they discovered was it was really about the leadership and the difference between the average store and the highest performing stores was that leaders of the highest performing stores built their teams around what their people were great at, not the traditional mindset of management at that time, and I think still today to some extent is, the performance review process is, let's talk about all the things you're not good at, and then let's build a plan to have you spend all your time focusing on getting better at things that you're not good at.
Which isn't going to happen, right? Spoiler alert. You can't all of a sudden reinvent. I can't be a CFA, Gene. I just can't.
Yeah, it's just not going to happen, right? So the most interesting thing about First Break All the Rules was that these great leaders threw out that rule book and they looked at it and said, let me find people that have superpowers that can influence the business. And then let me assemble a team based on, for example, in a restaurant, you need superpowers in your servers that can engage with people and and actually make the dining experience more engaging, more fun, more memorable. And the waitresses in this book, they talked about this, the waiters or waitresses that do that actually delivered higher levels of guest satisfaction. And along the way, bigger check sizes, which means they made more money in tips, the restaurant was more successful, all of those things. And yet, they may not be good at other elements of it. Maybe they're not great at attention to detail, right? Well, you need a kitchen manager that's prepping those orders to make sure, man, we get it right every time. So that combined, that becomes, 1 + 1 = 3 or 4. And so that's the foundation of First Break All the Rules. And then the follow-on was all about how do you actually identify the strengths of your team and figure out how do you get people to work together. And so a lot of what I do when I assemble teams and when I'm coaching people is I try and figure out, like, what are they absolutely amazing at? And how do I let them spend more time doing that and less time doing the things that they hate or they're not particularly good at? And, I think about my own experiences. I'm actually quite good with numbers and I can build a mean spreadsheet. Not one of my favorite things to do. I just don't enjoy it, even if I'm good at it. And I remember when I went back to school to get my MBA and going through these classes, having to build some of this stuff in finance. And it was like, I could totally get it done and I got good grades. But when I was finished, I was just like, this is exhausting to me. Right. Whereas solving a technical problem or a customer problem or a user experience problem in a piece of software or in a mechanical machine like Coca-Cola Freestyle is incredibly engaging. I love the challenge of solving a big multivariable problem and how do the harder the better kind of thing. That like gets me fired up. I don't I lose sleep. I don't need coffee in the morning because I'm just like energized and engaged. And I think if you can assemble a team that brings that kind of energy and expertise, you have a ton of fun and it doesn't even feel like work. It just flies by.
I had an amazing conversation with your chief of staff, Hannah Byers. And one of the things that I really like about Vanilla, again, this is a leadership podcast, particularly for women. I wanted to highlight more of women's stories. And I myself was struggling and was also too curious, like, what's this idea of getting from point A to point B? How can you next level your career? But more importantly, how can you learn from people who have already done it? Okay. And you're one of those types of people. And then I look at the powerhouse team that you've added to Vanilla. We've got Nicole Shamsuddin, who is the chief customer officer, Karen Notchbar, who you just added, chief legal, Hannah Byers, chief of staff. Boy, is she sharp. And one of the things that I had an amazing conversation with in preparation for today's conversation, she let me in on a very special secret. And that is the fact that you have your executive team meeting regularly with an executive coach. I love this idea. Yeah. This is huge.
I would tell you from my own personal experience working with a coach saved my career. My first leadership job at Coca-Cola, I was a complete disaster. I was a great salesperson that got moved into a leadership role. And of course, my immediate thought was, it's perfect. Now everybody has to listen to me and I can tell them what they need to do and we'll just crush it. And my manager at the time got me a coach and there was an intervention and there was a lot of soul searching around, how do you actually recruit followers and engage a team? And I've been influenced by very powerful women in my life as well, in particular my wife, who has helped me make some of the most important career decisions in my life. And she's smarter than I am for sure. And so my team really is a reflection of, the types of talent we've been able to find. And I think one of the things that helps me in assembling that talent is I don't really see necessarily gender or race or any of those things. I see individuals for the power that they bring. And
Mm.
Anne is a great example where she's got an incredibly driven, incredibly, very fast processing speed, very creative. She comes from the industry we serve and 7 years at Goldman Sachs. So she deeply understands customers, which makes her incredible at solving customer problems and product problems and setting context and all of those things. So really feel blessed to have her on the team. And I could go on and on about Karen, who is an amazing legal leader. And we serve a regulated industry, which requires the ability to really understand and manage risk. And Karen is incredible at that. She's a great thought partner as we think through things. And she, frankly, helps manage our board. And Nicole really came to us originally running customer support and success, and it has evolved and grown. She had a background in both big tech at Microsoft and then smaller companies, and has really grown. And I'm also a big believer of empowering people to make their job as big or as small as they want it to be. I encourage people to go big, right? And I think when you unleash people that way, you shouldn't be surprised when they exceed your expectations.
Yeah, I love it. Go big or go home. Again, the address for everybody is Just Vanilla. You can follow the company on LinkedIn as well, too. Let's talk a little bit about the future of Vanilla. You have this incredible team here. And again, I can relate to a lot of the things that we did at Intentionally that really moved the needle was because we had certain core competencies. We had certain individuals who that is their superpower, that remains their superpower. Nobody does it better than that particular person. And yes, our CEO, Kelly, make sure that we have the right butts in the right seats. And that's what enables you to go further, faster. A big thing right now that every single industry is dealing with is artificial intelligence. I wondered if we could talk a little bit about AI and how you see AI and how you see AI playing a role at Vanilla.
Yeah. Well, it's really an amazing time to be in technology with everything that's happening. And I would tell you, when I joined Vanilla, it was pre-ChatGPT, but I came from before Vanilla. I spent 4.5 years as chief product officer of Smartsheet, and then before that, 5 years at AWS building cloud services. And machine learning and the concept of AI have been around for a long time, but it really wasn't until the launch of ChatGPT that we kind of had that breakthrough with generative AI, where you really can start to see it creating and enabling things that were never possible before. And so when that happened, we immediately said this changes the whole landscape. And we started working on how do we start to think about both our products from an AI first perspective, but also our company. And it's hard to overstate how much AI can impact everybody's work and I think will impact society as well. And it's still early. It's hard to know where it ends up, but we're taking the approach of over time, we think a lot of the work that traditional estate planners do, that trust analysts do, and really I'm talking about more of the hours that it takes to go analyze documents and pull key provisions out or look for fact patterns and come up with an answer. That's all being done by AI now. And we've been doing a lot of work on that. And the thing that I think is exciting about it is it actually is going to enable these professionals that have really deep expertise to and people might think, oh, well, this is going to eliminate their jobs. It's the exact opposite. It's actually going to empower them to scale and serve more people and do it with less effort, because they're able to spend, kind of back to my focusing on strengths, they're able to spend the vast majority of their time applying their unique perspective and the strategies they've learned and connecting the human touch with the estate strategy, if you will, instead of spending the majority of their time reading documents, looking for specific provisions, and then pulling them out and putting them into, there's just a lot of efficiencies that are going to happen there, which ultimately I think means that they'll be able to serve a broader segment of the population, which furthers the goal of everybody is able to create a meaningful legacy. So we're focused on how do we put more intelligence into the product to both make the advisor better, make the planner better, and let them do it more efficiently. At the same time, as we build the company, we're starting to look at how do we put the right tools in place and how do we design the organization in a way that we don't have to have 1,000 people. And you hear a lot of founders these days and a lot of investors talk about this idea of kind of getting to 100. When you get to 100 employees, if you're structured right and you're thinking about the right way, leveraging AI tools, you should be able to continue to scale your business without having to add meaningfully more people. And so there's a lot of folks that kind of are bringing that mindset. And I would say we look across the entire company, everything from how do we write the Amazon style PRFAQs when we do product definition. We're leveraging AI to help us write those more efficiently, faster, and frankly, better. We're leveraging it to create marketing content. We're in the process of rolling out new tools to engage our customers from a support perspective. When you're on our website and you have questions and you're trying to understand something, just essentially AI is going to touch every aspect of a business.
We totally agree intentionally, and we're leaning into it too. I personally am working on the Google AI certification that is offered through Coursera for $49, ladies and gentlemen. Anybody can do it. And I promise you that the lessons are fun. You don't have to complete it in one fell swoop. And you'd be really proud of me, Jean. I built something in Notebook LM today. I'm utilizing an assignment. So I pulled and aggregated 8 different sources to get of information. Yeah, exactly. We're leaning into it too. And intentionally, if you're listening and if you're in the suite with us, you should be leaning in it too. And then the other thing I want to just mention, and then we definitely need to make sure that we get your contact information out for everybody. How do people follow your work? What's the best way to get in touch with you, Gene?
Well, I'm obviously on LinkedIn and certainly open to follow, or they can reach me at Vanilla. It's gene.farrell@justvanilla.com. And I'm GM Farrell88 on X.
There is a 2025 State of Estate Planning report. So for any advisors that are listening and you want to explore what are the latest trends and shifts in demographics and expectations, what families should be paying attention to you. Again, I like this for the retention aspect. We talk a lot about intentionally lifetime value of customer, cost per lead, cost per result, stickiness of client, retention, all of those things that are important to every single type of enterprise. So get your hands on that report. You have Gene's contact information. And before we wrap up, I want to ask a little bit of a personal question here. We are asking, and this is, again, something near and dear to me, a personal health or lifestyle wellness tip. A lot of entrepreneurs are listening. And again, people like me who've always wanted to take our career to the next level, you've got to have some wellness and health baked into there. So, Gene, what's your tip for today?
I would tell you, when I was in my, call it early 40s, I made a pretty big lifestyle change. I used to be quite a bit heavier than I am today. And I just realized that I read a book called Younger Next Year. And it talks about this idea that if you take care of your body and your health, both your physical strength and your cardiovascular strength, that you can really be as functional as you are in your 40s and 50s, right up into the point that you pass from likely something that is inevitable, whether it's cancer or heart disease or something like that. But the point being is that you can live a very full life and you don't have to view old age as being restricted to the recliner, if you will. And so I went through a major lifestyle change around my diet, my fitness, my exercise. I read quite a bit around how to maintain that. And I would say one of the things that has been probably the most influential to me was a book called Toughness Training. I was originally introduced to it by a guy who used to work with at Coca-Cola, Tom Long, who went on to be a CEO of Miller Coors and had a super successful career. But he introduced me to a book called Toughness Training for Sport. And the author went on to write this book about toughness training for life. And the whole theory is that your body goes through these cycles of training and recovery, both physically and mentally, emotionally. And learning to understand when you're overtrained or undertrained and how to stay on that kind of continuous journey of training and recovery. And it makes you stronger. It makes you more resilient. And it also helps you, for me at least, it helps me understand, when I'm a little off or when I'm having a bad day, like why and what to do about it. I may need more recovery. Maybe I overdid it in my workouts this week, or I haven't done enough workouts. And so I'm not sleeping well because I'm not having the mental recovery I get from physical activity, that stress relief. And so then my mind won't shut off at night. So that's been a game changer for me. And still super active cyclist. I play golf. I snow ski, wakeboard, wake surf, road bike, mountain bike. I try and do it all. And I think that's a big part of how you stay active and healthy. And it lets me bring my best self to the company. And that's my pro tip for today.
You have been tremendous. Thank you so much for being in the suite with us. We appreciate the courtesy of your time, your leadership, your expertise. Ladies and gentlemen, I hope for you all listening that this puts a big spring in your step. We're recording this episode in May. There are still 7 months of the year to make sure that it's a game changer year for you. And I love a lot of your both personal and professional anecdotes. Thank you so much for being here, Gene. We are better as a result. Thank you.
Thank you, Tina.
You're listening to In the Suite, the podcast that brings you inspiring stories of women leading the way in financial services and wealth management, along with the men who champion and empower them. Our producers are Tina Powell and Kevin Hirshorn. Our editor-at-large is Kevin Hirshorn. Our content writer is Tina Powell. This podcast is sponsored by Intentionally, a growth design consultancy working with fintech and finserve companies to turbocharge their marketing efforts. If you want more information, please email me at tina@growintentionally.com. And thank you so much for listening. It means the world to me. We've got listeners in over 84 countries and 1,739 cities worldwide. Please consider giving us a 5-star review on Apple or Spotify right now, right here. It would mean the world and help us to be found by more people. Please, I would love for us to connect on LinkedIn, and please follow In the Suite on Instagram @InTheSuitePod. Thank you again for listening and subscribing.